that same country has criminalized protesting for free Palestine. I mean, the double standards are so blatant as to make our blood boil. Can you not see the sheer hypocrisy? But no, it is now against the law. You will be jailed. You will be fined if you wave a flag and you say, free Palestine. It is illegal in the country that considers it to be a bastion of freedom of speech in order to insult the icons and the prophets of Allah. This is the reality. Again, in Germany as well, the same criminalization has taken place. In my own country of America, the president has literally said, I think the deaths in Gaza are exaggerated. How inhumanity, really. Not even an ounce of sympathy. And the Speaker of the House, that after an internal struggle and battle, our Speaker was just elected or appointed. And the first thing he says with pride, this is 2 days ago, the first thing he says, my first act as the Speaker of the House is to pass a bill in support of our ally and friend Israel against the terrorists that have attacked them. How do you think that makes me and all of us feel? Without question, there is a sense of, where am I? What am I doing here? What exactly is going on? And that, therefore, it is imperative that we as the Muslim community in the West take a step back and look at the broader picture. Take into account what exactly is going on. What are the pros and cons? What are really the strengths and weaknesses of us here as Muslims in the Western land? And so what I'm going to do today, and obviously as usual, time is always of the essence, time is always against us. What I'm going to do today, though, is to, insha'Allah ta'ala, implant the seed of the change of how we think about our realities. And the way I'm going to do this is by very quickly going over something that all of you in corporate worlds know very well. If you aren't in the corporate world, then I'll have to introduce you to a concept called a SWOT analysis. A SWOT analysis, as every person in the corporate industry knows, is an annual analysis that every corporation does that goes over your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. Your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. The strengths of every corporation. You need to know what makes you strong so that you can play to your strengths. You need to know your strengths to accentuate them. There's no arrogance. You need to know what you're good at. These are your strengths. Your weaknesses, what's wrong internally that you need to correct. Where are you going wrong? You need to overcome those internally. Your opportunities outside that you're not taking advantage of. What do you have the possibility to do? What potential can you maximize, yet you're not doing it? You need to be aware of that. And then your external threats. What exactly, if you're a corporation, your competitors, if you're a corporation, the economy, the laws. So I'm going to do, very quickly, a SWOT analysis of Western Islam, Western Muslims. The goal is to cause us to start thinking in different terms. The goal is for us to start thinking long-term, to be proactive rather than reactive, because one of our biggest problems is that we're always reactive. We only do something when something else happens. We only think of doing something when there's a provocation, when there's a disaster, when there's a calamity. Few of us are thinking 5, 10, 20 steps ahead. We're not visionaries. We're not thinking long-term. And that is a problem. And that is a mistake. So one of the ways that I want every one of us to start thinking proactively is to understand our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and our threats. And as usual, this is a short lecture, quick lecture. I can only do so much. But the goal, like I said, is for us to have a paradigm shift. I want every one of us, because every one of us in our own ways is a mover and shaker. At the very minimal level with our own families. Every one of us is a leader. At the very minimal level for your children, you are a leader. At the very minimal level. So every one of us needs to start thinking generations ahead. How will my grandchildren and grandchildren be? That's the very minimal. If you're more than the school teacher or an institute builder, then even more so. So, very quickly, sisters and brothers, what are some of our strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats? Strengths. And you know the irony here, I'm speaking to you as an American Muslim, but the reality is that the Anglophilic Western countries, the English-speaking Western countries, by this I mean America, England, Australia, and Canada, these are the Anglophilic Western-speaking countries, even though between us there are quite a lot of minor differences, but the reality is we are basically one community, in terms of overall what it means to live in these 4 countries. I've been to over 60 countries, I've lived in over 5 countries. Fact of the matter is, these 4 countries, their similarities are so close, you can really lump them together. Compared to European Islam, compared to Islam in France and Belgium, compared to Islam in Africa, Islam in the Middle East, fact of the matter is, our 4 countries, I'm coming to you from America, and yet everything I say applies to Canada, Australia, England, and America, with minor differences, but overall, the SWOT analysis is pretty much the same, because our cultures and our forms of government and our liberal democracies and overall our societies obviously share a similar heritage. So, strengths. Of the greatest strengths that we have as Western Muslims, of the greatest strengths we have, and this is a strength that frankly many of us do not appreciate, especially our next generation. Of the greatest strengths that we have is the political freedom to be who we are and to be faithful to our religion and to act and speak and to organize and fundraise without restriction from the higher authorities. Now, this is a right that is so basic to us, we don't even think that it actually does not exist in the majority of countries in the world, especially in many Muslim majority countries. The very fact we're here today, fundraising for a cause 2,000 miles away, the very fact that I've just criticized foreign policy of your country and my country. I am, alhamdulillah, a well-known cleric. My khutbahs are seen across the country. My minbar is one of the most, well-watched minbars in all of America. And last week, I publicly criticized my own government. And I said that we're supporting an apartheid regime. And I criticized our aid to an apartheid regime in the Middle East. The freedom to say that, and to not even be worried that there's going to be a knock on my door. Hey, how dare you criticize our president? I mean, if the police or the FBI dare knock on my door to challenge my First Amendment right, I would sue them and win in any court of law. Do you realize, in one of the most sacred lands, the most sacred land, and the sacred mosques, it is actually prohibited to mention Gaza and Palestine. And that's why, go look the khutbahs online in Arabic. You don't hear a single mention. Our Foreign Secretary, Blinken, traveled across the Middle East 10 days ago, and he made one request to the people in charge of 6 countries over there. One request: quell your public support of the Palestinians. That request from my own foreign secretary, he doesn't have the right to tell me to shut up. But a simple request to people in the Middle East translates down to memorandums being sent across all khutbahs, all imams. No one shall dare mention what is going on over there. And the max they could do is that the imam of the sacred land could just one sentence at the very second khutbah, oh Allah help the people of Gaza. That's it. That's all that could be done there. Forget about, we're getting angry at France that we're not allowed to rally for Palestine. Where are the Muslim countries? They're not allowed to. They're going to go to jail if they do. So do we understand the freedoms to be able to speak our minds, to organize, to petition? Yes, I completely agree with you. We are frustrated that our politicians are on one side, but the fact that we are on the other is not a criminal offense. And therefore, we have the right to influence, to mobilize, to petition. That freedom that we take for granted, that freedom does not exist even in many European countries, much less in the Middle East and other lands. This is a freedom we thank Allah for, we should cherish, and we should take advantage of. This is an amazing potential that we just take for granted, and a massive freedom. It's a powerful strength. This is a powerful, one of our strongest points. Another point, again, we're talking about our strengths here, right? Another strength we have is that by and large, Muslims in the West are, again, by and large, I have to be generic here, generally speaking, of the highest educated in the Almost all of us are literate. You do understand that many countries are not fully literate. We're raising funds because our children in other countries are not literate, right? Almost all of us can read and write. Many of us have, college degrees and advanced degrees. Look at, mashallah, the number of highly educated technical skills in America, England, Canada. Again, mashallah, the percentage-wise, hardly any country can compete with us. So us, Western Muslims, we are very literate, very well established socio-economically. We have, generally speaking, clout and power far above the average person anywhere else in the world. In fact of the matter is, pretty much every single one of us in this audience, by and large, we are in the top 1% of the world in terms of how we live, the quality of our life, our clean running, water. We can just open up the tap and drink water. The electricity, no civil war, access to education. We are already in the top 1%. 99% of the world would want to live how we're living. The surplus food in our pantries, astaghfirullah. Some weeks we throw more food away than we eat, astaghfirullah. The surplus of the luxuries of our living. This is without a doubt a strength that we have. Another strength that we have, and this is oxymoronic, it's actually ironic. But think about this. Living in these Western lands, wanting to be a good Muslim, your Islamic identity is felt daily. You feel like a Muslim. Now, ironically, I know for some of you don't think this, if you actually live in the Middle East, you live in a Muslim majority country, I'm telling you from experience, and ask anybody that has actually lived there, you don't feel your Islam. True. It becomes a hidden, a non-palpable identity. Whereas living in America, Canada, England, because we're always active, because we are visibly, because we're in this minority, your Islam becomes your identity. And that is a strength. And therefore, when religious Muslims come together and they want to do things, the sheer quantity and quality of Muslims that come together, you will never be able to compete with Western Islam. I challenge you, go to any Middle Eastern country and try to do something for an Islamic, even if the politics allowed it, which it doesn't. Even if the politics allowed it, to get the quality and quantity of dedicated Muslims to build an Islamic school, to do something for the Ummah, you wouldn't find it as easily as you do in these countries. So walk into your local masjid here and try to do something, and mashallah, people are going to come volunteer. Here, look at all of you coming together for a fundraiser, for a cause far, far away. And these leads me to another strength. The strength of us being a part of the superpower empires. Again, this is a reality. I'm just telling you the facts. The Western world is leading the rest of civilization. That is a fact. Our culture, our currencies, our entertainment, everything trickles down. Guess what? This means all of us have far more power simply by virtue of our existence on this side of the world. And this is manifested in even small things like what we're doing here. Over here in this city of London, you can influence and change and benefit and fundraise for causes around the world. Today, we're doing it for disabled children across the world in Kashmir. Tomorrow, you're going to do it for Syrian refugees. The week after that, something happening somewhere else. And every single week, you can do something else. Here, in your chairs in London, you can quite literally benefit the entire globe. I challenge you, you can't do this in the majority of other countries. The power to help people anywhere in the world. It's legal. I don't need to get permission from any government. I don't need to, fill out some forms and paperwork and say, hey, I want to raise funds for Gaza. I want to raise funds for Palestine. I want to raise funds for Syria. I want to raise funds for Kashmir. No. As long as it's generic charity, as we're doing today, our governments give us a blank check. Do whatever you want for humanitarian aid. This is a perk that we should bank in on for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What other country, what other land is going to give us this opportunity to invest for the akhirah? Across the globe, I'm planning and I'm investing in small little bank accounts in the eyes of Allah Azza wa Jal. One here, one here, one here, so that on the day of judgment, my ROI, return on investment, is coming from a diverse portfolio across the globe. Where else can you do that? Your sadaqah jariyah can quite literally be global, which is exactly what we're doing. Another strength that we have, again, this is just a partial list, so much can be said. Another strength that we have is that alhamdulillah, and you guys in England are leading the way, us in America are at the very end in this particular issue, and that is our percentages. Our percentages, they are not trivial. They are powerful and effective, and they're on the rise. And you guys are leading the way in the entire Western world. I just came back from Australia last week, literally a 10-day tour. And subhanAllah, I was very happily, pleasantly surprised. My first trip to Australia was 21 years ago in 2002, I went to Australia. And this is my third trip. I went last week. And subhanAllah, in 20 years, the Muslims of Australia, they haven't doubled, they've tripled. Tripled in number. They are currently around 4.5% of Australia. And the majority of them are concentrated in Sydney and Melbourne. So in those two cities, they're almost 10%. Now, you in England, in the UK, your percentages are 6, most likely 7%. 7% at a bare minimum. That's majority of UK. Here in London, you're probably 12%. This is a phenomenal statistic. 1 out of 8 people in this city is of our faith tradition. That is astounding. Do you understand the implication? Let me explain to you. In America, we're at the very end. Canada's 3%, so UK is roughly, realistically 7 to 8% the entire country. Australia is just becoming 5%. Canada's 3 point something percent. We are the very bottom, very end in America. We are less than 1%. In our defense, that's because we have 380 million people in the country, whereas you guys have 70-something, 80 million people, right? So there's a massive difference in terms of numbers. We are the largest, 380 million. So obviously, from that, when you do the percentages, we're going to be the smallest, less than 1% in America. So the point is, though, especially in England, 8% or 12% in London, that is a massive strength. A massive strength. We're going to come back to this in our opportunities issue. So these are some strengths, and there are many others as well. But of course, along with strengths, we have weaknesses. And there are many weaknesses. Again, for the sake of time and brevity, I'm just going to be quick here. One of the main weaknesses we have that we really need to actively overcome, one of the main weaknesses we have is that, unfortunately, even though we're 5%, 7%, 12%, this is a number on a piece of paper. We're not actually united together.
True.
We're not actually coming together for any one cause. We're not mobilizing. Even though if we did, it would be a game changer. If we were to mobilize together, 12% of London were to come together for anything, you don't think that's going to be a massive reality changer? It's a game changer. But unfortunately, amongst ourselves, we're divided and we're apathetic. As for divisions, and again, this is a deeper topic, but subhanAllah, we're divided on the most petty issues of nation states, where my ancestors were from Pakistan, my ancestors were Bangladesh, my ancestors were Egyptian, and because of these nation states, because of these imaginary lines that ironically, the colonizers themselves drew, right? Who drew these lines between Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan? Who drew these lines between Iraq and Syria and Lebanon? Who drew these lines? The very people who we're now living amongst. Their ancestors came to our lands, colonized us, and then drew these imaginary lines, and now for some reason we are divided based upon these lines. Oh, subhanAllah, our religion is more precious than these lines. And what really identifies us is our faith, not the origin. Yeah, there's no problem taking an element of pride in, I like biryani, I speak my Urdu language, but the minute my identity is used to look down upon another Muslim, the minute I think that just because my ancestors came from that village, it makes me better than somebody else, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. This is jahiliyyah. This is something our Prophet in the Quran warns against. But we are divided, let's be honest, we are divided on nation-state lines. We're also divided on sectarian issues, which is another issue that is a more complex and deeper issue. And I've spoken about this last year. I gave a series of khutbahs, how to deal with sectarianism. That's a bit more academic. You can listen to that. And, this is not the time to get into that, but we need to learn to somehow work together in spite of our differences, for the greater good, despite people's different, theologies or different firqas, different maslaks, different madhabs. I understand these are sensitive issues, but if there's a politician who wants to ban, protests for Gaza, I'm sorry, it doesn't matter how you pray, you put your hand here, doesn't matter whether you say Ameen out loud or not, doesn't matter your abstract aqidah differences, we need to come together and fight evil politicians. We need to figure out a way to work together in spite of our differences. And unfortunately, and I'm speaking from the class of ulama, so I'm criticizing my own class here. Many of our ulama really are not forward thinking in this regard, and they actually, create an atmosphere of sectarianism, and they foment sectarianism, and I'm very much against this. That's why I've spoken about this in a more academic manner. How do we, tackle this issue of sectarianism? But again, it is a weakness. Because if I'm not going to unite with, the 12% of the community simply because they have different theological understandings, right? If I'm not going to come together for what we agree upon because we disagree upon other issues, well, then we are in serious trouble, and that is the reality that we see as well. This is definitely a weakness that we need to work on and come together and unite on. So there are other weaknesses as well, but again, because time is limited, let us move on to some opportunities. Without a doubt, the greatest opportunity we have, without a doubt, the greatest opportunity we have is to influence the people around us at every single level. And in fact, that is why Allah Azza wa Jal called us the best ummah. كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ. You are the best ummah that I have created for mankind. Why? Because you command what is good, you forbid what is evil, and you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Quran that He is the one who has made shuhada'a ala nas. He has made you witnesses to mankind. Our job, our role is to be role model Muslims. We need to show what belief is in a world of unbelief. We need to show what faith is in a godless world. We need to be role model citizens, role model people that people can admire and respect and look up to. So the opportunity is open here. It's not our job to convert, it is our job to convey. It's not our job to force, it is our job to be role models. The people should see us and fall in love with us for who we are, and then ask us, what makes you like this? How can you be so ethical? How can you be so compassionate? How can you be so stoic? Right now, people are converting. Yeah, last week, in my own masjid, we had a person convert. His name was Mike. He is like a young man convert. And one of the reasons, looking at Gaza and the reality of the people in Gaza, the faith, the stoicism, the courage, the iman. How can you have so much faith? What is this faith that gives you this courage? And that caused him to study. And last week he converted in our masjid. Right? This is one of our biggest opportunities. And here, I remind myself and you, I remind all of you, real da'wah is not high-level, advanced theological debates. It's not knowing the intricacies of Christianity and bashing. No. Real da'wah, it is done at the street level, at the corporate level, at the office level, at the neighborly level. And it is done not by advanced talks, but by genuine, kind actions. You win the hearts of the people. You don't need to have debates with their minds. You win the hearts of the people by doing what? It's not complicated. By being Muslim, by acting prophetic, by following the sunnah of the Prophet in your mu'amala, in your akhlaq, in your rahmah. And the people who have never seen this reality, they've never seen the akhlaq that Islam comes with, when they see a person honest, truthful, trustworthy, a person of ethics, a person of values, a person who is exuding dignity, their hearts will automatically be swayed. And they will come to you knocking on your door. What makes you different? Why are you like this? Then you can say, I'm Muslim, and that's it. That's your da'wah. You don't need a PhD in theology like I have. You don't need that to do da'wah. Wallahi, that is not majority of da'wah. 99% of da'wah is through your manners. Just being a good person. With your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues, your co-workers. This is opportunity. We need to take advantage of. Along with the opportunity of da'wah, the opportunity to influence people. How so? In every single manner. And in particular, back to our point of lesson. SubhanAllah, here you are in London, 12%. Can you imagine if every one of you were to influence just 5 people and change their perspective about what is happening in Gaza? Through wisdom, through facts, through dialogue, through showing them videos, through sending them, clips and whatnot. If every one of you were to influence 5 people, that's it. Very reasonable number. That's a game changer. The majority of the city is now going to be pro-Palestine. It's very feasible. It's not something abstract, intangible. It is extremely possible. Now, the good news, that's already happening, but it's happening really, really, really slowly. It should not happen this slowly if 12% of London is Muslim. It should not happen this slowly. But most of us are not, again, back to our weaknesses, apathy and whatnot, right? Nonetheless, the potential to influence, the potential to bring about change, because in the end of the day, as we're all aware, that apartheid regime, it is only able to do what it does because our Western countries, and here my country is far guiltier than yours, I know this, but hey, all of us are collective, we know this. Your countries are also guilty, Canada is also guilty, Australia, our countries, they are the umbilical cord, they are the oxygen, we know this. Let's be honest here. If our countries were to withdraw support, then that apartheid regime could never do what it is. We know this. But guess what? These are our countries. Whose tax dollars are they using? Mine and yours. Whose votes? Mine and yours. Can you imagine if we actually mobilized, if we truly understood, this is my land. Why should my land be involved in a war in the Middle East? Even on the unethical side, makes it even worse. Why? These are my politicians. Their salaries come from my taxes. This is my government's policies. If we were to take ownership rather than to feel marginalized, rather than to feel disheartened, if we were to actually understand, you know what? The battle might be long, but it is winnable. It is winnable. The battle might be 2, 3, 4, steps, because that's the problem is we think one step, we think one rally, one vote. No, this is a long-term battle. And the good news, the tide is changing. The good news, we see the shift of the narrative. We already see this from the 70s and 80s. SubhanAllah, never, even in the 90s and the 2000s, never have we seen so many Palestinian voices now go mainstream. In my country of America, which is one of the most racist against Palestinians, last week they did a poll. 60% of my country that is below the age of 35, 60% said that the blockade of Gaza should be uplifted. Of course, this is below 35. But you know what? That's the good news, because in 10 years, this is going to be below 45. In 20 years, below 55. The tide is changing. And do you know why it's changing? Another opportunity here. Another opportunity. The opportunity of social media. Once again, this is a game changer. This is a complete game changer. Because in the 70s, 80s, 90s, even 2000s, there was no YouTube, there was no Twitter, there was no Facebook. And so you had to rely on the BBC, on CNN. And their interests are going to be from their governments and their sponsors. That's a reality. There is no conspiracy. It is what it is. It's not a conspiracy. In the end of the day, the people who pay you, they're the ones, their influences are going to be on the people that are paid. It's understood. It's human nature. But here's the point. With social media, I don't need the BBC. With social media, I don't need CNN. People from Gaza are uploading clips. People anywhere in the world. Here's the power of social media. Any person, anywhere in the world, in the basement of their parents' house, they upload a video or a tweet or an information fact. And technically, any person, anywhere, can reach every person everywhere. This is a power that we could not even imagine 10, 15 years ago. Couldn't even imagine it. And this is one of the reasons why this is a game changer and the perspective of Palestine is changing. One of the main reasons why the perspective is changing is exactly this, that more and more information is coming out, and people, in the end of the day, the average person is not evil. Wallahi, the average person has a good heart. And if they understand the reality of Gaza and the reality of the regime, the reality of the bombing here and the reality of the respect, they're going to see the disparity. And this is what is happening in England. The largest marches that took place since the invasion of Iraq, the largest demonstrations that took place yesterday, right? 2 days ago. The largest demonstrations, and last week as well, and next week as well, there's going to be another one. This is the reality of this opportunity that we have. And once again, every one of you needs to understand your role here. Why do you think Blinken, our foreign secretary, is worried about your voice? Because you have power. That's why they want to shut it down in the Middle East. They cannot shut it down in our lands. This is the irony. What he says goes over there, but the constitutions of our countries, the freedoms of our countries do not allow him over here. So then every one of us has to take advantage. We have two different, battles going on. There's the battle of the bodies over there. Nothing we can do, make dua for Allah. Then there's the battle of the minds over here. There's the battle of media, the battle of perception. And in that battle, every one of us has to be a foot soldier. I say this publicly and boldly. Anybody takes me out of context, I'm not talking about some secret jihad. I'm talking about the battle of democracy, the battle of voices, the battle of perception, the battle of media. This is what I'm talking about. Every one of us has to get involved and influence and change the narrative, because that's what it means to be an American or British person. It goes back to my whole point here. This identity that we have, we need to claim it as ours. It is not an oxymoron. Your existence is not contradictory. To be British and to be Muslim, in my case, to be American, to be Muslim, this is a reality we should embrace wholeheartedly. We should be grateful to Allah for, and we should maximize in our opportunities and potential. So there's a lot of opportunities that we have over here. And of course, of the opportunities, like I said, goes back to our strengths, the opportunity to help people across the world, whether it's in Gaza, whether it is in Kashmir, whether it is everywhere, sitting from here in London. Unbelievable. The world is at our fingertips. This is an opportunity. Now, final point here, and that is our threats. And again, we have a lot of threats as well. A lot of threats. But I'll just mention one or two, the primary ones in my mind right now. One of our biggest threats is actually existential, i.e., it threatens our existence. And that is a threat that I'm very worried about, and every one of us needs to be worried about. And that is the threat of losing our identity as Muslims. If every generation does not pass down the faith to the next one, that is an existential threat. Then all of these statistics and all of these numbers mean nothing. If by the next generation from 12 it goes down to astaghfirullah, no, we have to be very, very careful, because we don't like to talk about this, we do have a high attrition rate. We have people, just by attrition, I mean, they don't necessarily leave the faith, but they don't practice the faith. And if you don't practice the faith in your household, what's going to happen to your children? We all know, every one of us, family and extended friends, they're barely recognizable as Muslims. Their names might be Mustafa and whatever, their names might be Amin and whatnot, but in their lives and lifestyles, nominally, maybe just Eid and a few Jumu'ahs, a few Ramadans, and then their children, hardly. And this is an existential threat. And again, this is, if you listen to my khutbahs and durus, this is something I always talk about, because it is the biggest threat we have here. You see, statistically, culture and language, they do deteriorate generation after generation. And across the world, I mean, this is a well-known fact, I know it's depressing, you can never retain a language for more than 3 generations. Languages as a second language are gone. And again, I mean, look at our own household. I was born in America. My father came to Pakistan in 62. I was born in America. And you know, two people do Urdu mein baat kar leta hu, theek thaak, lekin not fluent Urdu. I understand, baat kar leta hu, baatcheet ho jati hai, you know, but my kids, they barely understand. They don't speak Urdu at all. My grandkids, whenever they come, inshallah, I'm pretty certain that maybe roti and dal and that's it, or maybe gosht biryani better than that, but still, you know, maybe they'll keep a few words, but that's it. And you know, it is a reality. It's sentimentally sad, but you know what? It's not a life-changing thing if they don't speak Urdu. But what would really be painful for all of us if they lost the kalima, if they lost the love of Allah, if they lost the ethics and values of our faith? That would be an ultimate failure for them. If they don't speak Urdu, well, okay, it's sad, but I understand this is reality and I can only, you know, can keep it for so long. But what I cannot afford them to lose is Iman. And the only way to pass Iman down, and this is not religious talk, this is anthropology, this is cultural studies. Go and read the literature about faith retention in families. Go and read the surveys done by top-notch researchers across the world. The number one indicator of children absorbing the faith of the parents, the number one, this is a study done by multiple people across different universities, across different faith traditions. The number one indicator that the children would grow up in the faith of their parents is that their parents lived an ethical and loving life based upon the faith. A successful marriage that was modeled around the faith. Their family values, their family structure was modeled around the faith. Whether it's Jewish, Christian, Muslim, when the mother and father, when the parents, when the husband and wife, when their whole lifestyles are healthy and around the rituals and around the, the annual holidays and around the theology and whatnot, and the children grow up in a loving household with the faith combined, then automatically they absorb it and it comes in their heart. And subhanAllah, we know this from our own tradition, right? We know this from our own tradition. When the parents follow Islam, the children will follow Islam as well. And so we as parents, this is an existential threat. We as parents need to be very, very careful about our own practice, because here, there's no such thing as being half Muslim. If you're a good Muslim, you're passing your faith down to your kids. If you're barely praying and you're only doing Jum'ah to Jum'ah, what do you think your kids are going to do? Think about this. If you're eking out your Islamic identity, what is going to happen to your kids? So for the sake of your grandkids and great-grandkids, you're going to have to raise the bar in your own life. This is an existential threat. You have to embody, because how you act, by and large, your great-great-great-grandchildren, inshallah ta'ala, will be acting that way. And if you're going to become lax, then this is the number one factor is going to trickle down. So this is an existential threat. There are other threats as well that we have that are not as existential. One of the threats, which is actually not, it's not that, inshallah, it's not that palpable in the Western English-speaking countries, but we're seeing this in Germany and France and Switzerland and other European countries, is the threat of legislation that is blatantly Islamophobic. Now, in England, you guys are somehow flirting with this when it comes to morality and, family issues. If you get my drift, I don't want to be too explicit, but you get my drift here. What is being taught in schools, and if you don't agree with it and whatnot, it's not an existential threat, but it is a threat of our identity. If we can't even teach our values to our children, that is not healthy. Listen, lakum dinukum waliya din. I'm not enforcing my ways on anybody else, right? This is the Quranic ideology. You have your religion, I'm not forcing you. But when you force me to not follow my religion, when you force me to not pass my identity down to my children, that is honestly highly problematic. And I'm not a part of your country, so I cannot tell you specifically what to do, but I will say generically, we cannot allow any legislation that is going to be blatantly Islamophobic and predict our identity to live our lives. Yes, legislation that is freedom for other people, we might not like it, but the minute it interferes with my freedom, the minute it stops me from practicing my faith and passing my faith to my children, that becomes a serious threat at a different level. And we cannot, as much as possible, allow that to happen. And we should fight back within the system legally as much as possible, because once they start opening this door, then, as they say, the sky is the limit. And that is definitely a threat we need to be aware of. Now, there's a lot of other, strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats that we can speak about. But let me go back to one particular point, inshallah, which is why we are here today. And that is, of course, the issue of the strength and the opportunity to influence and help people around the world. This is one of the greatest blessings we have from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sitting here in London and having the wherewithal and the means and the strength and the political freedom to help people anywhere. And subhanAllah, this actually leads me to a theological point. And with this I conclude. A theological point. Fact of the matter is, I didn't choose where I was born. It wasn't anything to do with me. I didn't choose the fact that I had an upbringing in America, education in America, access to the American system and whatnot. If Allah had willed, I could have been born in Palestine. If Allah had willed, I would have been born in a refugee camp. I didn't choose where I was born. I didn't choose anything. Allah blessed me beyond measure. Allah blessed me to live the lifestyle I live, to have the amenities I do. And that's a bit scary, because I know I don't deserve those blessings. I know the people in Gaza don't deserve, yet Allah is testing them. And Allah Azza wa Jalla in His own way is testing me, even though their tests are far more difficult, of course, than ours, no question. But yes, it is a test. Our test is a different type of test. It is the test of surplus, the test of excess. We have privilege beyond our wildest imagination. But with privilege comes responsibility. With wealth comes responsibility. With access to all of these blessings comes the responsibility to help those who don't have these blessings. And that is what we're doing here today. Sisters and brothers, the fact of the matter is very simple. We have the opportunity to help people around the world. How much are we actually doing? I'll conclude with one hadith, and I want you to understand this point. It's a beautiful incident from the seerah, actually. And it's something that causes me to pause and think about this reality. It's mentioned in our books of hadith, our books of seerah, that there was a wealthy businessman in Medina. He owned properties, lands, dates, cultivation. He had a house in Medina. And his younger brother asked permission to come to Medina, to study with the Prophet ﷺ. He didn't have a house, he didn't have money. His older brother has that. So he asked the older brother permission, can I come and live with you and study and be a part of your community to come and study with the Prophet ﷺ? The brother said, yes, go ahead. So he came to his brother's house, and the days turned into weeks, the weeks turned into months. And the older brother began to feel a sense of privilege. He began to feel, this is my younger brother, living in my house, eating from my food, taking advantage of my rizq and sustenance. And he's not really doing any work in the fields, not work in the business. So he felt stinginess. And subhanAllah, sometimes the stingiest people are actually the wealthiest people. I mean, what difference does it make if your brother's sleeping in one corner of the house, one pillow, one blanket, one plate of food? What difference does it make to you? Oh, wealthy man. But subhanAllah, shaitan sometimes, you feel that. So he actually confronted his younger brother. And he says that, you've come to my house, eating my food, sleeping, in my house, eating from my rizq. By the way, notice my, everything, my. But you don't do any work for me. I'm going to complain to the Prophet about you. And he actually went to the Prophet. He actually complained, Ya Rasulullah, this student of yours, by the way, when you're a student, you can't work. It's understood. When you're a student, you're busy. And what type of student was he? Engineering, medicine? He's a student with the Prophet. Can you imagine the most blessed student? So he said, Ya Rasulullah, this student of yours, he's my brother. And he came, living with me, eating my food, sleeping in under my, everything mine, and he doesn't work for me. And the Prophet ﷺ gave him a response. He looked at him with pity and sadness. And he gave him a response with 3 words that completely flipped the script, completely did a paradigm shift. And that is what I want me and you to think about. He said to this wealthy man, he said, لَعَلَّكَ تُرْزَقُ مِنْ أَجْلِهِ. Perhaps all the rizq that you have it because of your brother. Meaning, Allah wanted your brother to come to Medina. And Allah wanted him to have a roof to sleep under, and a pillow to sleep on, and a plate of food to eat from. And Allah wanted this for your brother, so He gave you your entire wealth. And it wasn't even meant for you. You are not deserving of it. But Allah wanted to help your brother out. So Allah set you up, raised you up, made you successful, so that your brother could find that one plate of food, and that one pillow to lie on, and that one blanket to have. So rather than feel a sense of arrogance of your wealth, my money, you'd better humble yourself and be appreciative that you have this person whom actually Allah wanted to take care of through you. And Allah is so generous, and Allah is so kareem, that Allah lets you to have 99% of it if you just spend that 1% on somebody else. I wonder all the time who that person is in my life and your life, because of which we might have all of these blessings. I wonder whose sadaqah we give, which charity we give, and that one orphan says, may Allah bless them. One widow says, Jazakallahu khair, whoever the person is. And that dua goes, I don't know the name of that person, that dua goes to the 7 heavens. And because of that dua, perhaps I'm allowed to live the life that I do. I don't deserve it. I haven't earned it. I didn't choose it. But Allah gave it to me. The least I can do, the least is to help those that need to be helped, so that inshallah ta'ala on the day of judgment, I can at least come and say, Ya Allah, you did bless me with so much, but I tried to help here and there. And today we're raising funds for one of the most vulnerable of the vulnerable, and those are children with special needs. You can't get, more needy than this. Children, many of them orphans, many of them refugees with special needs. Special needs require special care, and I have traveled to read multiple times. I've been to multiple countries, seen their fruits, and seen the realities of what they do. SubhanAllah, sisters and brothers, this is really one of the best charities that I have, had the honor to work with. And I work with a lot of charities, but I chose to be the ambassador to read because I firmly believe education is a game changer. And allowing some education and allowing some way out gives the potential to change lives in ways that a simple food or meal doesn't do. So I ask all of you to do what you can to maximize your benefits in Allah's eyes, to get the most ROI for your investments for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Give fi sabilillah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to give you more so that we can continue to give others more. Wa jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.